Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
Hello and welcome to the Women Today podcast, a look back at some of the show's highlights this week. Now, no one ever said that bringing up children would be easy, and there are certain times when you might expect more problems than others, the teenage years being the most obvious example. But for some young people, those issues go far beyond the usual teenage angst, and a growing number of parents in the island are finding themselves struggling with children suffering from things like anxiety and depression. So that's why, 18 months ago, two local mums set up a charity called Parent to Parent. Essentially, it's a support group run by people who've been through or are going through tough times to help others in the same situation. And we're joined by Lorna Fairclough, who is the director and one of the co-founders. Lorna, how important would you say it is to have a group of people who truly understand what you're going through, just to be there?
I think it's so important. Basically, what you go through from the start, from the early days of watching your teenager struggle, is a sort of a process, really. You're probably a little bit like, what do I do? You know, how do I deal with this? You may look for support. You may actually feel judged, which, you know, you can actually judge yourself as well because you think you've got it wrong. You know, the fact that your child is struggling and you don't know what to do. The obvious thing to do for most parents, we find, is they go to the GP. Some GPs are, you know, very supportive. Others are a bit dismissive. But what we do find is as time goes on, the child will get support from maybe a referral to CAMHS, but the parent is left without support. So this is very close to my heart, having experienced it myself, and my other director, Emma, has also felt the same thing. So we decided that we would support each other. And then, as you've said, it's kind of grown from there, and we've become a support team, if you like, a network. So it is important. It's very difficult to know where to go, and you do feel, as a parent, quite lonely.
How do you know, as a parent, what is normal, expected teenage behaviour and what isn't? Because, as I said, I mean, there is a certain amount of teenage angst, if you put it that way, that is typical, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a difficult age for any teenager. But I think the normal door slamming, staying in bed late, answering back, that sort of thing, you kind of expect as a parent. But then when it goes to another level where the child is maybe missing out on, say, an activity that they've always done, you know, from being small, and then all of a sudden they withdraw from that, they maybe take to their bed and longer than a normal teenager would. And, you know, some children even end up agoraphobic because they're so nervous and so anxious about what bothers them when they go outside that they stay within the home where they feel safe. So those sort of signs, for a parent, I would say that's the sort of thing you need to be looking for. So if you've had a teenager before, then you would probably have already gone through the grumpy years. But so you may know what to look for. But if it's your only child, you may think that it's actually quite normal. But it's very difficult because children now are on Facebook all the time, they're on their phones all the time, so they're already withdrawn from the family to a degree, and they're in the bedroom because that's what teenagers like to do. But there are other signs, and I would have said it's more the withdrawing from friendship groups and school and that sort of thing that you maybe need to be aware of, really.
So Parent to Parent grew from a friendship between two mothers going through very similar experiences to what it is now, a year and a half later. How many parents do you think that are being supported by Parent to Parent currently?
At the moment, well, it's difficult to say because they kind of dip in and out of support, and we're there for however long they want us, basically. So they may just contact us once and have a little chat, and then that's enough for them to move on. They may have found support elsewhere within their family group, which is enough for them. Sometimes it's just having an odd chat with someone who you know understands, and that's invaluable. You know they're not going to judge you and they know they've experienced it, but you may just need that chat once a month. Other people talk to us quite regularly, so it just depends on what they need, really. But I would say we've probably got at the moment half a dozen families who we are currently supporting regularly.
He has no guilty pleasures, says his proudest moment is yet to come, and apparently he used to be good at tap dancing but gave it up when he fell in the sink. He is also one of the island's most prominent Manx architectural historians, and Peter Kelly MBE, I would like to give you a no screeching, no giggling guarantee right here, right now. Can't vouch for others in the studio, but we'll do our best. If you had free reign over the Isle of Man now from an architectural point of view, what would be the first thing you'd do?
Very difficult to say, really. I mean, there are architects in practice now who are respecting the past. There are others who want to be avant-garde and do something out of the usual, which is fine, particularly if it's a new building and it's in a setting, in its own private woodland or in a field or whatever, but not stuck in between older buildings in the town. And the excuse usually is, and of course they've all been to the same architectural college or university, is, well, all our towns have grown up over the years with different styles of architecture, so therefore we'll stick something that stands out in the middle of it. But, on the promenade, the new Villiers building, which is not so new now, the planner's defence at the time was it has the same rhythm as the rest of the promenade. In other words, it's slightly curved and it's got bay windows coming out. The fact that they're oblong and not semi-octagonal like the rest, the fact that the lines that run through the heights of the windows is different, didn't seem to matter. It was just having the same rhythm.
With regards to, because you're talking about a new build there, new buildings at the start of what you're saying there, you were also the president of the Preservation of the Manx Countryside, and I just wonder how that correlates with sort of new developments and taking over new areas of the island.
Well, yes, I was president, and some years before that I was chairman. In those days, we had a planning officer, not paid, Ian Bleasdale, and he had assistants with him. Roger was one of them. Even Marge Jockin was there too. And they did an excellent job. They looked every week at the plan submitted and, put in comments. In my role as chairman and subsequently as president, I didn't deal with that side of it. I think in the time my role as chairman, I was possibly still in practice. And on the basis of dog doesn't eat dog, it's better to stay clear. The Victorian Society, of course, is something else which I've been greatly involved in. And we do make comments on planning applications, although perhaps less now than we did previously, really due to lack of time on my part. And people sort of say, well, what have you saved or whatever? Well, it's very hard over 40 years to think back. It's not so much saving buildings, but saving buildings from destruction or partial destruction by inappropriate alterations, etc. But I don't know. It's one of those things. Save Man's Heritage was another one which I was involved in. Victorian Society tended to look at Victorian Edwardian buildings. Save Man's Heritage went before and after that event. Because land is zoned and they're constantly changing, I mean, they recently appealed for people to come forward and say, I've got land that will be suitable for business. Because it's zoned, it is unlikely that an office block or a new building would be put up in the countryside as opposed to what was zoned. I think the only exception to that was probably the film studio outside Ramsey. And at the time I commented to the planners that this was a biscuit tin, basically, going in land that if someone had applied to build a bungalow, they'd have been turned down. Anyway, the comment was that, or the reply, they couldn't be anywhere else. I said, well, what about Derby? Oh, well, no, there's too much background noise in Derby. So it had to be here. And then 5 years, 10 years later, it's empty, but it's still there. It's still a biscuit tin in the middle of a field.
Peter, I just wonder, from your point of view, if anybody is taking a look around the Isle of Man, perhaps they haven't really considered the architecture and the importance of that before, where would be the best place to start to see some really good examples, would you say?
Well, you could follow the Bailey Scott Trail, and it's very difficult for me in my own mind to decide which is the best building or whatever, because they're all important in different ways and in different scales. You could have Ballamore Castle or Great Meadow, which are large houses, or equally you could have a small summer house in the back garden of somewhere. What I have found is, particularly of recent, with correspondence with people, those who have come to the island and had a look round and gone back, that the one building which seems to stand out is the Castletown Police Station. and that's the ones which others say, well, this is a gem. This is quite something, and yet I'm sure the people of Castletown and the south of the island and the north of the island, anybody who drives through will go, oh, well, there's the police station. They don't think twice. But then when you step back and have another look, then you realise there's something, and it's good that people from across see the goodness in it, see the jewel that's there. When back where they come from, there's cathedrals and all sorts of things. Yet suddenly, wow, look at that.
And just finally, Peter, what would you say has been the most devastating loss architecturally for the island?
Again, difficult when you look back. The loss of the Majestic was tragic, but on the other hand, it had been altered a lot, and really to hang on to it, you needed to put money into it to perhaps put it back to more what it was. There are those who think the loss of the Palace Lido was a great thing. Yet I bet none of them realise it was only built in 1922. It wasn't a Victorian building. Sometimes it's not just the loss gone forever, it's the destruction by doing things to a building. And you can destroy it just as much by inappropriate alterations.
Our studio guest this afternoon is the twin sister of a man who is currently paralysed from the neck down and unable to speak because he is suffering from a very rare condition. Leanne Moore, thank you so much for being with us. Just tell us, first of all, what it is that your brother Alex is suffering from.
My brother's got a syndrome. It's called Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's a very rare condition, especially the condition he's got. He's contracted the acute motor and sensory axonal neuropathy. Very big words to say, sorry. But he basically is completely quadriplegic from the neck down. He's currently on a tracheostomy. He started with some symptoms about 3 months ago now, and he rang an ambulance, and he's been in Nobles and now in Walton ever since. But he's not able to speak. The only thing he can do is shake his head and nod his head, and anybody that knows Alex Keenan as is will know how very frustrating that is for him. It's almost like he's locked inside his brain.
But you can communicate with him?
Yes.
How do you do that at the moment?
I talk at him, and then he can nod and shake his head. He does try and mouth words, but he basically can't move his mouth too well. So he's having speech therapy and things to try and get him to articulate a little better with his mouth.
Leanne, this must have been utterly terrifying when Alex was first taken into hospital. He didn't know what was wrong with him. How, as a family, have you been coping with this over the past 3 months?
We've tried very hard to cope with it. My parents are getting on in years. I hope they don't mind me saying that. But Mum's been suffering from a heart condition recently, and my dad is quite immobile himself. So they've been there as much as they can be. My mum's just come back from Liverpool visiting Alex, and my sister's currently saving the reefs and saving whales and things in Fiji.
Because she went away just as this was all starting.
Yeah, she did. It was really bad timing, and it broke her heart, bless her. But she's trying everything she can from where she is.
So this is an incredibly rare condition, what affects around 1,200 people, maybe in the UK, to varying degrees, because from what you were explaining to us just before the show started, there are 4 types, and Alex has got the most severe. Mm-hmm. What do you know about his long-term prognosis and what the steps are going to likely be until hopefully he gets completely better?
Unfortunately, even the neurologists can't give us an exact prognosis, but they can pretty much tell us that he will recover to an extent, but what extent that will be is completely unknown at this stage.
And I mean, you described Alex as being always locked in, although he can communicate with you in some way. It just must be so incredibly frustrating for someone who's so intelligent and so used to speaking to people. How is he in himself, if that's not a ridiculous question to ask?
He's utterly miserable. He's very, very sad and feeling very sorry for himself, I think, as many people would do in his situation. But he's going to get better. He knows that. He just is very frustrated to get there. He wants to be better now. But he's doing the physio every day that they're doing on him. And he's being very nice to the staff. So, yeah, he's a very nice person.
I was just wondering if you've been in contact or know anyone else with this syndrome.
Well, actually, very own Tanya Humbles was very, very helpful initially, and she's passed on some details of people, and people have been in touch with me as well to tell me that they've had a relative that's suffered from this and to what extent they've recovered and things, and it's been really good to know because it's so rare. It's about 1,200, 1,500 people in the UK alone be diagnosed every year. So it's been great to know that people get better, and it's great to be able to tell Alex that, because at the moment I don't think he thinks that's going to happen.
So first of all, he was taken to Nobles Hospital, and then he was transferred to the Walton Centre Intensive Care Unit. And I think the most striking thing about what you said, Leanne, was that obviously he started with these symptoms which got worse before, please God, they are actually getting better now, which must have been incredibly distressing for all his family to watch him go through that.
It was heartbreaking to see somebody that you love. I'm sure that many people have had to deal with things like this, but to see somebody that you love in that position, not knowing what it was and not knowing what the outcome would be, being told they didn't know if he would survive, it absolutely broke my heart. And my parents were in pieces, but we're working on it.
And what you have done is you have completely just been a force to be reckoned with when it comes to fundraising for this. And we heard about this on Manx Radio News a couple of weeks ago. You turned to a crowdfunding page. And what is it that you are actually raising money for?
Well, myself and my sister, this is the way she's helping from where she is. But basically, we're trying to raise money to help Alex, to help the family with travel expenses, which I'm sure you can imagine going on a weekly basis as being very expensive, even though you do get a lot of help from the government. But also to help with equipment for Alex for rehabilitation and to give him the best possible outcome that we can get for him.
What do you know about the long-term prognosis?
We know very little about it. Most people do recover. There are different, there are varying recoverable ways in which people come out of it. So some people do have long-lasting issues. However, we don't know what those issues will be for Alex. So we are hoping, all I want is my brother to get his voice back right now, because that is killing him. Anybody that knows Alex knows he doesn't shut up. So this has been very, very hard for him. But he's recovering. It's going to take a long time. It can take up to about 3 years to get a recovery out of it.
People who come on here to talk about fundraising nearly always talk about how amazing Manx people are in cases like this, and the generosity of people who you don't even know, who you'll never even meet, who really are touched by what they've been hearing about.
I have been, as my family has, we've been utterly blown away by people, by family members, by friends, and by people that we don't know. And it's been absolutely amazing. I can't thank anybody as much as honestly, I've got so many thanks to give, but I can't give them to some people. They've all been anonymous. It's so kind. People are kind. And that's what people need to remember, because especially in the job that I do, we usually see the bad end of people. But do you know what? Everybody's kind in some way. Everybody's got a little bit of heart, and they've been so helpful. And Alex cried. When I told him, he cried, and that made me cry.
Michael MacDonald, Coast Guard duty officer. First couple of things what people really need to check is obviously the weather. Make sure you got the correct clothing for the weather. So, for instance, if it's nice and sunny, make sure you got suntan lotion, this, that, and the other. If it's really bad weather, coats, warm clothing as well. You really need to check the tides. The Isle of Man tides, there is quite a big range of tides from obviously high water to low water, but we also have a thing called neap tides and spring tides. And these then can be exaggerated by sometimes storm surges, which can, theoretically raise the water level by, nearly a metre in some cases.
Are there particular areas around the island coastline that are more dangerous than others?
Luckily, on the Isle of Man, our coastline is fairly benign to places like in the UK. But obviously, places like the north of the island, where Ramsey, the tide, because of the shallow beach, sometimes the tide can come up very quickly and retreat very quickly. Places down south, the risks are being cut off. It's very rocky and craggy around the southern parts, and there's not many access points to get on and off the beach. So sometimes we find people getting trapped by the tide, especially if it's spring tides and the tide is coming in very quickly. So the Isle of Man is fairly safe, but you just need to have your wits about you. Do your homework first.
And with regards to, I know I was listening to some of the reports on the BBC this morning, and they were talking about, in particular, riptides, and they were talking about if you do get caught in a riptide, what to do about it. So could you just tell us what a riptide is and what you would suggest if you do get caught in one?
Yeah, a riptide is when the tide is coming in and it goes over 2 bars of sandbanks, basically, and physics dictates that water will always try and find the easiest way out. Hence the reason water does never flow uphill. So as it's flowing out, it will try and find a gap in between these 2 banks. And it will actually flow through these 2 banks. It will get squeezed, but it will be like a jet of water. And sometimes it looks, when you're on the beach, that's the calmer water, and it looks more inviting to go into where all the waves are, where in actual fact that's just a jet of water being shot out to sea. The advice is basically, if you find yourself in a riptide, is basically not to face the shoreline, try and swim against the tide, but to go with the tide and go horizontal, go parallel to the coastline and swim to the side, and you will feel then that the riptide and the flow of water will reduce. And once you get to a point where you feel you're not being pushed further out, then you can start moving towards or swim towards the shore. If you swim against the riptide, you will never swim against it, and you'll tire very quickly.
Are people still sort of going out onto the seas in things like dinghies and small boats and maybe getting carried away that way?
Yeah, we're still experiencing or getting people, especially on sunny days, going out with inflatables. Unfortunately, sometimes there is an offshore wind, which causes the inflatable to be carried out sometimes with that person on board. We have in the past had quite a few kayakers who have obviously bought a kayak, haven't really got proper experience, find themselves getting pushed out to sea quite quickly and then struggling to get back in, where we've had a couple of people capsize and, literally tried to swim back at some point. That was down the south of the island.
Okay, and what about the fact that obviously we are an island, we have lots of promenades, we have lots of piers, and they can be very inviting? Yeah,
especially during the hot weather we're experiencing at the moment. We've been watching people on the Douglas Promenade jumping in off the steps. Yesterday we had people at Peel jumping off the breakwater into the harbour. Even during rough weather, everybody's seen again the tabloids in the UK where we had those 2 young people on the pier playing chicken with waves. All extremely dangerous activities. We strongly advise people not to do that. Water is very heavy. A cubic metre of water weighs a tonne, and that's more than capable of picking you up and throwing you back into the harbour. Even likes of roadway to the Peel Castle, where waves are crashing over Fenella Beach. People have been driving their cars through the waves. And unfortunately, those waves are big enough and heavy enough to lift a car in some cases. So we advise people not to drive through waves on the promenades as well.
Because there are a lot of activities, aren't there, that seem to have become more and more popular over the past few years, with the likes of people putting on the wetsuits and actually going fully swimming all around the coasts of the island. And then, of course, coasteering as well. And obviously you can go out with trained groups, can't you, where there's health and safety and they know what they're doing. But it's best not to take that upon yourself, isn't it?
Absolutely. Again, our advice is if you want to do that type of activity, tombstoning or rock climbing and this, that and the other, is to find organisations. There are plenty on the Isle of Man who will do that, and they're in a controlled manner. They have risk assessments. They have all the health and safety bits and pieces they need, the proper personal protection equipment, wetsuits, helmets, gloves, and they all have plans just in case something does go wrong. So if you really want to do something like that, they're the best people to talk to. Like I said, the coast is a beautiful place, but can come up and bite you if you're not careful.
Is there a particular place where people can go for more information about this?
We're quite happy to give anybody information at the Isle of Man Coast Guard here. If you just call the CETO, the Marine Operations Centre, we're more than happy to give anybody any information on the tides, the weather, any safety advice if you're going out either kayaking or on bigger boats, or if you just want to go for walks. So, for instance, we advise, the north of the island where there's sand cliffs, not to walk close to the cliff edge. People might have seen pictures in the UK tabloids where a cliff face actually fell down and there was a major operation to see if anyone's underneath them. Stuff like that, we can give advice on that if people just call us on the General Coast Guard number, which they can find on the internet.
It is 19 minutes to 3, a journal to help you manage your emotional health and well-being. It's called Free Your Mind, and it's been created by 2 sixth form students from Castle Rushen as part of their Young Enterprise scheme. Mary Podmore and Alex Ollier are with us this afternoon. And Mary, we were hearing at the start of the show that this all came about because of some of your own personal experience of dealing with certain issues growing up. What sort of things were you going through?
Well, I think teenagers go through stress anyway. It's very common, with GCSEs and A-levels. But when I was young, just starting high school, I had an illness in the family, and I know this affects so many people. So many things like cancer or so many illnesses. And this can be really hard to deal with for the whole family, and that's what I found really difficult.
And where did you go for help and support then? Were you able to talk to your parents about it?
In the beginning, I felt really scared, and I thought I was the only one. I didn't understand what was happening, but eventually it became so overwhelming that I went and spoke to my mum, and she immediately went and booked me an appointment with my GP, and then I was referred to CAMHS. But it's so oversubscribed, that service. It's amazing, it really is. Everyone there is so supportive, but it can take months just to get onto the CAMHS waiting list. And it can be really difficult to find a place. And usually when you get there, you're at critical point anyway, and your mental health issues can be quite severe by then. Yeah.
And one of the things they talked to you about was something called journaling. Now, for anyone who doesn't really know what that means, how would you explain it?
Well, when I went, my counsellor told me that journaling can really help, and she told me it's like a problem shared is a problem halved, and journaling can really help just rationalise everything that's going on in your head. Once it's down on paper, you can talk about it with someone else, you can really think about it and deeply process how you're feeling. And also having it down on paper and a date and a time and with what's happened can help you reflect on different things and how different things made you feel, how you coped with it, and how you can change that in the future.
And how did you find the whole process working through a journal yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just bought a book to, write in to begin with, and I found it a bit odd because I'd never done it before, writing down how I felt and things like that, but I soon got into the swing of it, and it was amazing. I did struggle, however, to reflect on past entries and where to find how I felt or how I coped, and was that really to do with this, which is how we came up with the thought journal. Yeah.
Okay, so Alex, you start off in sixth form, you're doing the Junior Achievement Young Enterprise. Where do you start creating a thought journal that is going to be useful for people going through what Mary's been describing? Where did you start with it?
Well, Mary came up with the initial idea because she'd been through the experience herself. And then in our team, we just started working through ideas, and the main engine of it was Mary came up with a lot of the ideas, and we just kind of pushed through it and went through logos and went through what the book would look like in different sections. And then Mary came up with the idea of, well, it was the whole reflection idea, wasn't it? Looking back on what you'd put in before. And then we sent off tips to CAMHS for different things such as bullying and anxiety as well. And they approved all them, so then we put them in the back of the journal. And then Mary came up with the idea of the toolkit as well, where they can either doodle in it or they can write down things that have helped them in the past entries and different tips that they found useful. And they just jot them down in the back, don't they?
Just incredible. I just always imagine it's a bit like The Apprentice, when they've created something and it arrives in a big box, and how you see their faces of like, ooh, because it's incredibly professional looking, Mary. You must be so, so proud of it. And it has been recognised as well. You won an award for this.
Yeah, just last week actually went... the Ashgrove Marketing, they have a creative awards, and Callum Finch, who works with them, emailed us, and we were very surprised to be asked to enter. But it was so flattering. It was really lovely. So he sent us the instructions of what to do. We put together a rationale and then sent it through. And we went to the awards evening last week, and we won the prize for innovation, which is really good. Yeah.
Brilliant, well done all. Alex, it's interesting because we were talking just before you came on the show, you were saying about when you were younger and having anxiety when you were much younger. Do you think this is useful for sort of any ages?
Mm-hmm. I think, we're looking into adapting it for people who are a little bit older, but I feel like, it could definitely be used by someone who's younger. Maybe just some of the things it would have to be a bit more interactive, maybe with a bit more colouring or stickers or things like that. But when I had it when I was younger, definitely something like this would have helped with it a lot better then.
The other thing I love about this, it's got a quote of the day as well, and there are various really short but inspirational, meaningful quotes. Where did they all come from, Mary?
Hours of scouring the internet, trying to find different ones. Because I think there's about 80 diary pages in there, and we had to find one for every day. But the purpose of that, I think, is mental health has a big stigma around it. It's all negative and things like that. But we thought that a quote of the day if it helps focus on the positive. That's why also in there we have like where you can write down your positive feelings, because a day is full of ups and downs. And it's good to not just focus on the downs, but also the ups that you had, the highs in the day.
Alex, I really personally admire you for coming forward and obviously speaking on the radio. How difficult has it been for you to obviously talk about this as having that guy kind of image?
Well, I found it very difficult when I was younger. It happened in about year 4, and I had it for a couple of months. I struggled with it, and then I went to see a therapist, but I only really talked to it with my family and barely then. I think it's quite difficult to talk to guys about it because, not being sexist, but I think they don't understand it as much as some people would. And I think especially when we were younger, they wouldn't understand it. Whereas maybe nowadays they might understand it when they come to this.
And what about your dad? How did he accept that?
I don't really remember much talking to him. It was more I spoke to my mum about it. But I think he kind of understood. But it's quite difficult if you've never experienced it yourself, I think, or if you know someone that's experienced it. I think without knowing that, it is quite difficult, and that's why we kind of try to raise awareness for it as well, to help people understand what people are going through, and that's what I think the journal helps with as well.
I can almost hear my parents' generation kind of going, "Oh, come on, pull your socks up, it's just your age, it's just your age." Did you have anyone say that to you?
No, I didn't at all. I think, my mum, as soon as she found out, especially after a big event in the family or something that would obviously lead to some troubles, she completely understood. I can see though why people might say that, especially as you said, the older generations, because it was quite a thing of like, oh, just get on with it, isn't it? But I think that's really changed nowadays. I think people are a lot more understanding, and I've heard a lot of the time like mental health is just as important as physical health. And it really they affect each other as well. So I think that the awareness that is coming about now is really helping our generation come to terms with it and accepting other people.
Teenage years, though, are typically difficult. There are certain things that you expect your child to go through during this time. How do you know when it is something more serious, do you think?
I think that's really hard, a hard question, and I think it's on a very individual basis as well. Some people are a lot more open about talking about things like mental health, and some people are a lot more closed in. I think it's, as a parent, if you feel that your child is acting different to normal, or because I think parents have very good intuition anyway. I mean, obviously I wouldn't know, but I know my mum, when she could sense when I wasn't feeling great, and she still can now. But just like go off what you think. And if not, then go and speak to someone, go and talk to someone who knows about mental health and ask them what they think you should do about it.
We're talking about fitness and well-being this afternoon. Our guest is Jackie Walker, who's been in the fitness industry for over 20 years. And we're just talking about whether or not you are fitness fanatics. Do you rely on those exercise apps or programs to keep you in tip-top shape? Apparently they're not so good, and they could have a lot to answer for, making exercise, apparently, Jackie, a lot harder than it is. Now, this is because people become overconfident, perhaps they're not doing the right techniques. What do you make of these things, which obviously in the past have been quite good in getting people moving at all?
I think the main thing about these apps is your technique. Technique is everything. You've only got to do something wrong. You can put your back out, your knees out. then you're off and you can't do anything. So it might start people off, but we get lazy. I'll just pause that and have a little break here. You've got no one breathing down your neck all the time, or people around watching you. So does it matter if you take a few minutes off, or
is that what we
cheat a
need
bit?
then? Do we need to have somebody, do we need a little Jackie on our shoulder telling you to get moving?
Everyone's different. Some people, e.g., can go out running and they can go and do it by themselves and be perfectly happy. But the majority of people, a good 90% of people can't. They need somebody to drive them on. And if they've got the determination, someone behind them, they will go far and they will achieve what they want to achieve. Whereas something on a little phone, I can't see how that can actually work.
Does it get to the point, though, where there's like a tip in the balance? Because you were saying that you class yourself as being addicted to fitness, for
Yes.
instance. So does it get to a point where you do so much that you no longer need it because you just need to do it?
No. There's not a week goes by with me doing my 20 classes a week that I don't ache.
Oh, great. Well,
I ache. And the idea is we need to ache. You need that ache in that muscles. You need that stiffness, because that's the only way that the metabolism keeps going, because it's muscle damage. So repair that muscle repairs back stronger and bigger and able to cope. Hence, more calories are burnt. And so if I didn't ache, I think I'd be a bit boring. I'd be a bit bored and boring. You know, I enjoy that feel. Mm-hmm.
There's a word for people like you, Jackie, but I'm not going to talk about it now. But in terms of people then starting out, I mean, obviously we talked about this at the beginning of the year, didn't we? The New Year's resolutions, you're like, right, I'm going to go out and get fit. Some people do have what seem like quite plausible excuses about why they can't do certain things and things to do with their diet and whatever. What do you make of people when they perhaps present you with some of these excuses?
Some excuses are genuine, but it doesn't matter what your problem is, you can exercise. It doesn't matter what your problem is. I've got one lady coming back to me who's just had a slip disc repaired, and she's coming back to me. So there's no excuses. You know, you can keep going.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. Like, before I started training for the Great North Run, I found it so hard to find that motivation, but having something like a goal to work towards even gives you the motivation you need to do it. And I think
dangle a carrot in front of somebody, whether it be weight loss, whether it be general fitness, whatever. Someone has a goal that they want to achieve.
But isn't it fair to say that for some people there's an element of self-consciousness which maybe stops them from doing it, and because you don't want to go out there and make a fool of yourself, do you? Particularly if you're in a class full of people who might have been doing it for ages and you feel that maybe you're not up to scratch. I'm not, obviously highlighting myself here at all in one of your classes, Jackie. Just so you know.
No, I think the whole idea is my classes are fun, and if I get a new person that hasn't exercised in a while, I do make a beeline for them, and I will actually say to them, you can wiggle that bum as much as you want, you can sing along as much as you want, because no one will be watching you, they'll all be watching me. And so, it sort of breaks the ice a bit. And I said, it's not about getting it right, it's not all wrong. It's just about going for it and just enjoying the music. Anything is better than nothing.
Your routines are completely different, I think, to what most people would expect from an exercise class. How do you come up with them all?
Some of them are franchise. So Boogie Bounce on the trampolines is a franchise. So those routines are created for you, but obviously your personality has to come over. Anyone could just go and teach that, but if you haven't got that oomph with it, you're not an individual. Things like MetaFit as well, they are already done for you. But then you've got your own little intakes, like your body sculpting that you can add your own little twists to, your Zumba that you can add your own little twists to, Bollywood dance, you name it. And they are you. They are the individual that teaches them.
A lot of these new ones, like Zumba and Bollywood dance, obviously, do incorporate dance. And obviously you being a dancer, would you say that dance is one of those sort of ultimate exercises that just does every little bit of you?
Yes, it does. Yeah, I love to dance. Would have loved to have been a dance teacher. But
so why didn't you?
Well, unfortunately, in my time of being a teenager, you sort of hit 16 and your parents didn't support you anymore and you had to go out and work. So I couldn't carry on my training, not like nowadays where there's scholarships to be had. There was nothing back then. It was a case of you go out and you work.
We've also had a comment in from Kate who says, we do all need a Jackie to motivate us. Absolutely love Jackie's classes. You're always guaranteed to leave with a smile on your face and an ache in your limbs.
There you are, see.
Well, you're going to be giving some more people an ache in their limbs over the weekend because you are taking part in the Relay for Life, which is the cancer research this Saturday and Sunday at the NSC. And there's a very particular reason why Team JG is taking part.
Yeah, my husband Richard was a cancer sufferer. He's in remission now, so obviously it's a subject that's quite close to our hearts as a family. So our Gina from GDA Studio, she's in our team, and we also have 2 other cancer sufferers in our team.
And you've raised £6,000.
£6,000, yes, we've raised that, and we're still after more donations, so if you'd love to donate to us, we will accept.
And we'll put a link to that on the Women Today Facebook page. But Thank you so much for downloading the Women Today podcast. As ever, if there's a guest you'd like to hear on the show or something you think we should be talking about, then we'd love to hear from you. You can contact us via email. It's womentoday@manxradio.com, or you can go to the Women Today Facebook page, like and follow the page while you're there, or we're also on Twitter. It's @MRWomenToday. Until next time, goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com. Love being Shaw. Terms and conditions apply.